As a big fan of comic books, I think there's a discussion and a criticism of comics that needs to be had that doesn't really get brought up too often. And it's the idea of sexual assault and the over-sexualization of women, specifically within comic books, being an issue that's been around since it feels like the dawn of the medium. And it's one that I think isn't getting extremely worse, but one that really needs to be pounded down upon, especially in the times now where women are getting more and more opportunity to write within the medium in itself. And we have some amazing writers who have done so. But today, I want to speak on this issue. So if you guys want to tune in to see what I have to say about women being over-sexualized or the sexual assault of women within the medium, stick around.
You're now watching The Captain.
Now, this is a conversation that I honestly want to have more of with other women who are fans of the medium and even writers and creators within the space, because I feel like they are the only ones that can give a true perspective on how they feel about some of these issues. But what I'll try to do is give my best take and perspective on this stuff based off of conversations I've had with other women who are fans of comic books or just nerds in general. When looking at Western comics, there is a big thing that I've always had an issue with as I've gotten older, starting with just the over-sexualization as a whole. I feel like there are different instances within comic books where characters are made even more sexier than they need to be. And I understand this in particular isn't just an issue with women, because even then you have the He-Man physiques in comic books where men have disproportionate bodies and have 25 abs and things of that nature. But I feel like over time though, it starts to become more disproportionate in regards to how that's represented. I feel like I see more women within comic books have wild character costume designs that are really unneeded. Like there's one design of the Invisible Woman I saw at one point to where she literally has a bikini with a boob window. Keep in mind, this is a character who her whole shtick is her having the ability to become invisible where you can't see her. And again, this isn't a thing with the character in itself, but this is an issue that some writers have. And I feel like we have the issue to where some writers get to kind of overindulge in how horny they make things. I know it's been an issue with somebody like Bruce Timm, where he would like always put and draw Harley Quinn in these weird sexualized scenarios or have things happen with not just her, but other characters. I understand the idea of making characters attractive, making them sexy. These are like people who are superhuman and bigger than life, but I think there's like a certain limit that you need to have with the issue of the over-sexualization, because I feel like until it gets to a point to where it's just overdone. And again, when characters are sexualized in scenarios where they shouldn't be, that's where I get irritated. If you're doing a situation like more recently when the Storm comic stuff where Storm is trying on a wardrobe and she's feeling herself and she feels sexy and comfortable, cool. Have some panels where she may be in lingerie and she's showing off her body and she feels good in that scenario. But if we're in a scenario where she's in a character's in a full fight and this fight has literally torn their clothing to shreds to the point to where it's like yarn or little pieces of fabric keeping a boob or areola from popping out, that's where I think we're going to start to have issues, at least from my side of things. I think things need to make sense. You can have sexy designed characters, but how sexualized they are needs to be very much so relevant to what's going on in that moment in time. And I feel like, at least in comic books, historically, that's not been the case for a lot of instances. Or there are characters who are sometimes even just created just for the idea of them to be sexual beings and sexual objects. Look at Cindy Moon Silk as a thing where when she was first introduced, her whole thing and whole gimmick is that she's a Spider Woman, but her whole big contribution to the whole thing is that her and Peter can't stop having sex for whatever reason. She's just overly horny and freaked out. Although that can be a thing and a plot point, it just feels kind of gross in certain moments for me. Maybe I'm gassing it. If I am, cool, but it's just how I feel about it. I love to hear from women how they feel about this, because in particular, I on my channel have talked about representation being a major thing within my channel. A lot of the Black characters that I feel like were important to me, and seeing somebody like me get to do amazing things made me feel like I belonged within a space. I'd be really interested to see how women who are fans of comic books and have always watched and really love these characters, when they get to see a character like a Cindy Moon, especially if you're an Asian woman, when you're seeing somebody that represents you, are you kind of looking at things kind of sideways because her whole origin story, it revolves around her being overly sexualized? Or when you're looking at characters like her or Laura Kinney X23, a very popular character who I covered on my channel not too long ago, and look at her origins and some of her like first appearances, and her being overly sexualized and essentially being a child sex worker was something that's kind of crazy to see and see that somebody wrote this story to be that way. And again, these characters can go on to have great stories and great beats and have other writers come in and make them really popular, like with X23, but there's always still those like stints of those issues that I see there. Now, moving past the over-sexualization standpoint, which I know can be very subjective to a lot of people, I'll move into something that I feel like may not be as subjective, and that being the way that sexual assault and trauma and abuse are handled in comic books. So this part of the video was inspired by a few Twitter posts that I saw in which people are very concerned and very taken aback by the idea of some recent stuff with magic in comic books, where they're showcasing how her and a lot of other characters that they noticed have origins that were founded in abuse and assault, especially as children. And it's something that we've noticed has been kind of a trend over comics over time, to where a lot of writers will use this abuse and trauma as a shtick or a gimmick or for pure shock value in a way. And it's one that I've always had issue with in regards to not just comic books, but writing in general, from shows to anime to movies, whatever it may be. When you're going to use something like abuse, especially in a sexual facet or a sexual manner in your story, it needs to, one, make sense, and two, it needs to be shown in a tasteful manner, which sounds kind of crazy to say that something like this can be tasteful at all. But for me, in the way I see it, do not make me sit there and watch the entire thing be a event that's going on in front of me, if that makes any sense. I can deal with implied abuse, and you can kind of let me know like, hey, this character is going through these things because they suffered this trauma. Cool, we can use that and keep it going. But whenever I'm forced to see panels or a scene where a character, a woman in particular, or a child is being abused in any manner, especially that being a sexual one, it pisses me off a little bit, because you're doing this to make me mad and to make me feel uncomfortable, which I feel like I'm gonna be just as uncomfortable if you would have implied that thing, if you would have maybe shown like a silhouette, even though like that's even pushing it. But for me, we have a lot of instances and a lot of ways where comic books are showing these panels of characters being made to go through these really crazy and it's out there scenarios where I just feel like they're not needed. I feel like you could, again, show the implied violence and have just as impactful as a story as you would showing a character being brutally murdered in a sexual way. And it's been one that I understand you're doing it in a way to make a character seem more like a monster than what they are. I know it's something that Victor Creed Sabretooth has been really guilty of in the past, and how people have written him to be a monster, or even certain characters like Captain Marvel going through her own stuff where she was like somehow like assaulted by someone who was her son, or I don't know how. I gotta look it up to see how detailed that is, but I know it's like a weird situation where she was assaulted as well. This has been something within comic books that I feel like needs to be changed drastically going forward. And again, I know these issues are ones that are not super prevalent as much now, just for the factor that we have a lot more representation within the areas of writing. There are amazing women who are writing stuff like a Kelly Thompson or Stephanie Williams, who are women who are telling stories that feature women, but are very much so a more authentic way. And I think that's just how we go about fixing this stuff, because I don't want to bring these issues up and not give ways in which I feel like they can be rectified. I do feel like the solution for a lot of this stuff is to have people that are of these experiences you're trying to tell either give some input on the story about how to tell it, or be the ones to write this story outright. When you have somebody like a Kelly Thompson write for a character like Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman is going to sound and act a lot more like a woman would. And that's not me just saying Wonder Woman is going to act more feminine. It's me showcasing how even in a character wanting to be more badass or feel like she needs to be more strong and independent, it's not going to go the route of her essentially being a woman in a Zack Snyder movie or any kind of Rob Zombie film where like women can only be powerful through their sexualization. They can't just be strong women. And I think that's an issue that I've seen a lot of comic books in general. Not even just comic books, but just in media in general. But again, when you see women be the ones to write this stuff, they understand as women what makes them feel powerful, and it's not always just the sexual nature. Again, you can have characters like a Poison Ivy or maybe like a Black Cat who thrive in their power coming through their forms of their sexuality, but even then I feel like it's more of them manipulating sexuality than them just being overtly sexual. And again, there's a deeper conversation to be had here. Maybe I'll have a Captain's Lounge episode where I sit down with writers or women who again are fans and more knowledgeable about the field of comic books, so it's not just me talking about this stuff from a male perspective. I do want to definitely hear what women have to say about this. So again, if you're a woman watching this video, let me know in the comment section below if you feel as though that my thoughts are maybe on target, or maybe I'm kind of gassing it, or how you feel in particular. And men, it's not me saying that you guys can't give an opinion on it, but I think this should be around where men who are within this industry and are fans within this community should be more of a listener than a active participant in the conversation. Like again, we can give our thoughts and our perspectives, but again, this is something that is representation for women that I feel like does not get spoken on enough, and I feel like not enough women don't get the chance to speak up on. So again, y'all let me know in the comment section below how you feel about it. I know this is kind of me rambling for a little bit here and may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but this is something that I feel like I need to just get my thoughts out on and kind of speak on a little bit. Again, if you made it this far, I'd assume that you enjoyed the video, so please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you guys can be more informed on different videos that I have on comic books, movies, etc., video games, all that good stuff. And again, this has been Captain Diesel of Captain Diesel's Dojo, and y'all be good people. I'll talk to y'all next time. Peace.